Y bueno, para continuar, les quiero presentar a continuación el honor de recibir en este escenario por primera vez en México a un pionero en la efectividad publicitaria. Él es Binet, Group Head of Effectiveness en adam&eveddb, que ha cambiado este paradigma de cómo entendemos el marketing a largo plazo con este enfoque basado en datos. El día de hoy nos va a compartir sus insights sobre cómo equilibrar las estrategias de construcción de marca, evidentemente de activación, a corto plazo para lograr un éxito sostenido durante este tiempo. Por favor, quiero pedirles una cálida bienvenida a Binet, pero antes de tenerlo aquí en el escenario, quiero invitarlos a ver el video que es presentado por JC Deco.
Hello, I'm Binet, Head of Effectiveness at adam&eveddb, which is a creative agency in London. And I'm here to talk about a new revolution in marketing effectiveness, which I think is taking place around the world today. And first of all, let me just stress that when I talk about marketing effectiveness, I'm talking about the ability of marketing and advertising to make money for companies and brands, to generate sales and cash flow and profit. So, what is this revolution that I'm talking about? Well, I think over the last 20 years or so, have seen this great transformation of the marketing landscape, this embrace of new technology, which can be summed up in what you might call digital-first marketing. What is digital-first marketing? Well, underlying this are a number of assumptions about how marketing should work today. That legacy media are dying and that we must embrace and shift to the new digital media. That we should shift from wasteful brand advertising to hard-working performance marketing. That we should use tight targeting to increase the efficiency of our marketing and advertising. That we should own the most valuable segments of the marketing audience, the digital natives, the youngsters, the Gen Zs. That we should use selling direct, D2C, direct to consumer, to get higher margins and closer relationships with our customers. And that it's not about the old ways of charming and seducing and flattering our audience, but giving audiences the information that they need to become, if you like, rational optimizers. Converting those people with relevant, timely offers. Using digital CRM to keep our customers loyal. Using digital data to measure everything in exquisite detail in real time. And to measure and optimize the return on investment, the ROI, to maximize profit. And I'm very lucky in that I've had access over the last 20 years to an amazing database of information on the effectiveness of thousands of marketing campaigns. And I've been able to track the effects of this digital-first revolution on effectiveness and efficiency. So this chart shows two things. It shows the ROI, the return on marketing investment, the financial payback, if you like, from marketing and advertising over the period from 2006 to 2018. And it shows effectiveness in terms of the extent to which you measure and move things like sales and profit. So let's look at what the transformation, the digital-first revolution, has done to ROI. Yep, it's been extremely successful. We've managed to more than halve return on investment. And effectiveness has relentlessly declined. There's a problem here, isn't there? What went wrong? The thing is that many of those assumptions that I just talked about, many of those items on the digital manifesto are based on very flawed thinking about how marketing and advertising works. So I'm going to give you what I think is a more accurate picture. So marketing is an investment in a very real sense. It's not just a cost, it's an investment. You put money in and you're investing to generate money and cash flow over the next few years. And there are two ways that you can invest in marketing. Let's think about it in terms of the marketing funnel. The obvious way to invest is to invest at the bottom of the funnel in what you might call performance marketing, direct marketing, or as I often call it, sales activation. Now, this stuff is very simple and very obvious and very easy to understand. You're catching people as they're about to buy. You're getting their attention when they're in the market to buy the product. And you're converting them very efficiently from prospect to customer. And if you get that right, then you generate an immediate sales response and an immediate payback. But the other way of using marketing to generate cash is brand advertising or brand marketing, which is quite different. This is about reaching people before they come to buy. And it's about creating feelings and associations and memories which will influence their behavior when they do come to market. Building lasting memories. Now, that's more subtle and less obvious, but it has powerful effects. It's about making sure that when they do come to the market, they consider your brand, and ideally consider your brand first, and ideally getting them to actively seek your brand rather than rival products. And if you can do that, if you can get people to seek you rather than you having to go to them, then you don't have to spend so much money on those bottom of the funnel performance activities. And in fact, what happens is if you build a strong brand, you make people more receptive to performance marketing when they see it. You make them, if you like, warmer to your brand. And that makes the performance marketing work better. It increases the conversion efficiency of your bottom of funnel activities. The other thing it does, which is really powerful and really important, is it reduces price sensitivity. People will pay more for the brands that they feel good about, the brands that they feel warm towards, the brands with which they have a connection. That means you can charge higher prices, and that means higher margins, and that is immensely profitable. So performance marketing is important. It needs to be part of the mix, but it only generates short-term sales. You get spikes in your sales each time you turn it on, but when you turn it off, the effects decay away to nothing. Brand advertising lasts longer and the effects accumulate. So if in this chart, the performance effects are in red, the brand effects in blue, they build, they accumulate, and so they raise the base level of sales so that each time you are starting from a higher base. They make performance work better, so the performance peaks are higher, and it reduces price sensitivity. So brand makes everything work better. Now, what I've just shown you is a theory, but let me show you a real example. So this is from a financial services brand where we measured in detail the brand and the performance effects. And here you can see it. So in this case, we're looking at the brand sales from 2015 to 2021. The red part of the chart shows those short-term performance effects. And they're big, and they're dramatic, and they're important. But underneath that, the yellow layer shows the long-term effects of brand building. And you can see how they build and they raise the level of the red peaks. And you can also see how, if you turn everything off, the performance effects keep lasting for some years to come. Now, those red spikes are easy to see, and they're big and important, but actually, they only represent 40% of the sales effect. 60% of the sales being generated come from the long-term brand effects. And this 60-40 ratio comes up again and again. So in 2022, Meta, the artist formerly known as Facebook, conducted a study looking at 3,500 advertising campaigns around the world, and they concluded that 60% of the payback comes from long-term brand effects and only 40% comes from short-term activation effects. And in fact, in the last 3 weeks, 2 new studies have been released in the UK that yield almost exactly the same response. One by Thinkbox, which is the organization which represents the TV advertising industry in London, and one by ITV, which is one of the big TV companies. And in both cases, using very different data and very different methodologies, they concluded this 60-40 ratio was true. 60% of the payback comes from long-term brand building. So 60% of your volume and your revenue will come from brand building. But the other thing that brand building can do is to reduce price sensitivity and increase margins. We find that the stronger your brand, the more that you move brand metrics like mental availability and one's closeness towards the brand, the more you move those brand metrics, the more you reduce price sensitivity and the higher prices that you can charge. And charging higher prices is the key to big profits and resilient brands and strong financial performance. And a study done by Kantar in association with the University of Oxford in particular showed that there was a strong connection between emotional brand building and the financial performance of companies, if you like, the share price. And that can be highly profitable. We found, looking at the IPA data bank, that companies that increase volume for demand for their products tend to produce good profit results. Advertising campaigns that reduce price sensitivity tend to be more profitable. So supporting price is more profitable than supporting volume. But the really sweet spot is to do both. Sell more stuff at higher prices. And brand advertising can do that. It's almost like a marketing superpower. So, you need brand and you need performance and you need them working together. But you also need to make sure that you spend enough on all these activities, because while spending and investing in marketing communications will always raise your sales, will always take your sales to a higher level, as I showed in the zigzag graph. What you'll find is that no matter how much you spend, there will always be a ceiling, a plateau, where, as you can see in this chart, sales begin to stabilize. So advertising ignites growth, but it doesn't keep you growing forever unless you spend more money. So sustained growth requires not just having a great campaign, but it requires rising spend. And obviously, no budget holder wants to hear that news. You not only need to spend quite a lot of money, but you need to spend more of it. And it's even worse. The more your competitors spend, the more you need to spend to keep up. In other words, advertising is, if you like, an arms race. And share of voice is really important. So how much should you invest? There's no iron rule for this, but there's a company called Magic Numbers in London which has done some very good research looking at this question and looking at advertising to sales ratios. So that's the ratio of your advertising spend to your revenue. And what they concluded is that the best returns tend to be achieved when your advertising to sales ratio is something of the order of 5%. So if you spend about 5% of your sales revenue on advertising, you're likely to get the best results. Now, that will vary by market, by category, by size of brand and so forth. But I think it gives you an idea of the scale of how much you need to spend to get a result. And I would ask you to think about your own brands and think about whether you are achieving that kind of scale, whether you've got that kind of presence that you might need to move the dial. I suspect there will be many companies represented here who are not at that level. So that's my first challenge, if you like, for you guys is, can you get up to that kind of scale to kind of achieve the results that you might want to get, the ROI? So make sure your budget's at the right level, make sure you're spending at the right level, and then the next thing is to make sure that you have the right balance between top of funnel brand, bottom of funnel performance. And that matters because they work together. Each enhances the other. We've proved this by doing experiments. So this is some data from an experiment that I worked on a few years ago with an FMCG brand in the UK. We divided the country up into a number of test regions, some of which had brand advertising, some of which had direct marketing, some of which had both, and some of which had neither. Now, where we used brand advertising on its own, we found that sales rose 5% faster than the control area. So adding brand advertising increased the rate of growth by 5%. When we added direct marketing only, actually, that increased the rate of growth by 11%. But where we added both brand and direct together, it increased the rate of growth by 33%. In other words, the combined effect of brand and direct, brand and performance, was twice the sum of the individual effects. And this doubling, this synergy, this doubling of effectiveness is quite common. It's been repeatedly found in multiple experiments. And in some cases, the synergy is even greater. So brand and activation work together. Each makes the other work harder. And for that reason, you need both, and you need both in balance. And what we found is that for an average brand in an average category, the optimum balance is, guess what, 60-40. That same ratio again. 60% brand, 40% activation, 40% performance. Now, that's an average, that's a typical ratio, but it does vary by category, it does vary by brand, by situation. And what I would urge you to do is to understand what the ideal ratio is for your brand in your market and your category. So use market mix modeling, use that to measure the optimum ratios. This chart comes from an MMM study, and it shows for a very specific brand in a telecoms category how varying the mix of brand and activation from, at the left-hand end, pure activation, at the right-hand end, pure brand, how that sales response varies for that brand. As I say, in this particular case, the optimum was 60-40, but your brand may be different. So use econometrics, use MMM to find your optimum. So you've got the right budget, you've got the right mix. So the next thing is to think about who you're going to talk to, targeting, and whether you're going to go for penetration or loyalty. And if there's one book that I would recommend you read here, I would read How Brands Grow by Byron Sharp. How many people here have read Byron Sharp? Good. It's a great book. The research is superb. If you've got room for 2 books about marketing on your shelves, then add The Long and the Short of It by Peter Field and Les Binet. So what Byron Sharp and the crew at Ehrenberg Bass Institute have shown is that in market after market, category after category, year after year, penetration is the main driver of growth. Loyalty is a secondary phenomenon. Marketing is not about increasing brand loyalty. It's mostly about getting more customers. And that's true in all categories. We've seen no counterexamples. So if you're working on a loyalty-first strategy, if you think your campaign is primarily about increasing brand loyalty, think again, because loyalty-first strategies always underperform. The main driver of growth is penetration, and the main aim of marketing and advertising is to convert non-buyers into buyers and light buyers into slightly heavy. What Byron calls sophisticated mass marketing. And that has implications for targeting. If you look at marketing that talks to existing customers using CRM, loyalty programs, using organic reach in social media to talk to your community, and of course customer service, that's important, but it's actually the least effective and least powerful form of marketing. That's why loyalty strategies, loyalty-first strategies underperform. Marketing that talks to potential recruits, hot prospects, this is performance marketing, shopper marketing, direct marketing, programmatic paid search, that tends to produce bigger results, tends to generate more sales, tends to increase market share more. But the stuff that really works, the stuff that has the biggest effects, is brand advertising that talks to all category buyers. Broad reach communications. That's where the big money is. You need all these things working together, but the biggest lever is brand advertising. And your budget should be allocated in this kind of ratio. Brand advertising 60%, activation 40%, and within that, most of it devoted to hot prospects. Loyalty is the least important. So reach is the main name of the game. Targeting is less important than reach. You need to be reaching out to everyone who buys your category. Once you've reached them, what do you want to do? Well, you want to make sure that they think of your brand. This is about mental availability. It's about making sure that your brand comes to mind when they come to buy. That can be thought of as a continuum from, if you like, awareness to fame. It's not just about brand awareness, it's about taking people up this ladder. Brand awareness is first base. People need to know who you are and what you're selling, and if you can get that into people's heads, then they will recognize the brand and they will passively accept the brand. But you need to go beyond that. You need to go from awareness to salience. You need to make sure that they think of your brand, that they automatically think of your brand when they come to buy. You need to ideally make sure that they think of your brand first and that they actively seek you out. You want people searching for you. You want people Googling you. You want people going to the shops that sell your product. Make them come to you. And at the top level, you have fame. If I know your brand, and you know the brand, and I know you know the brand, and we all know the brand, and we talk about the brand, then you have a chance of turning the public into part of your sales force. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to get to the level where people talk about your brand and recommend your brand, and where the press talk about your brand. But if you can do it, you get extraordinary results, because as you move up this ladder, you get increasing returns, and the most famous campaigns tend to be on average about 4 times as efficient as ordinary advertising, 4 times as powerful at selling stuff as ordinary advertising. So this is the primary aim of brand advertising. In fact, almost all advertising is to get the brand into people's heads, to make people think about your brand at the point of purchase. But there's another thing, and that is to make sure that people don't just think of your brand, but think well of your brand. You want them to feel positive about your brand when it comes to mind. Now, traditionally, we've talked about this in terms of communicating marketing messages, about getting your message out there, about making people think something about the brand and think something about the product. And that is very powerful if you're doing direct marketing, performance marketing, trying to generate those short-term activation effects. If you want people to click on your link and buy your product right now, then doing emotional advertising is not actually very efficient. You want actually to give people the information that they need to know whether the product is right for them. You need to tell people about products. You need to tell people about prices. You need to tell people about where to buy. So if you're wanting to generate those clicks, you're wanting to generate those activation effects, go for rational messaging. But if you want to build a brand, it's the other way around. The more that you move away from telling people things to making people feel things, the stronger and the bigger the brand effects. And remember, those brand effects are the main driver of long-term sales and profit. It's, when you're thinking about payback, it's 60% brand, 40% activation. So how people feel about your brand ultimately matters more than what they think about it. So we've talked about targeting, we've talked about content. Now let's think about media. If you're doing sales activation, you need to be tightly targeted on those people at the bottom of the funnel, the people who are in the market to buy the product right now. You need to be quite rational. You need to give them the information they need to know whether or not the product is right. You need to tell them about prices and about where to buy. And you need to make it easy for them to respond. You need to give them a link to click on. You need to give them a phone number to ring. You need to tell them where to go to buy the product, where the shop is, what the website URL is. But brand building is almost completely the opposite. Brand building needs to be broad reach. You need to talk to everyone who might buy the category, and I really do mean everyone who might buy the category in the next 2 or 3 years. And you need to reach them at an emotional level. You need to make them feel something. You need to connect with them on a human level. And you need to do something which is memorable, because we're building brand memories. So I think you can see that these two things are almost completely opposite. Very hard to do both at the same time. You can't be both broad reach and tightly targeted. And it is quite hard to be both rational and emotional at the same time. And we find that for that reason, what we call double duty ads that try to do both don't tend to work very well. So which media are the most effective? Well, again, returning to that study that Meta published in 2022, they measured the short and long-term effects of different media for 3,500 advertising campaigns. What did they find? Well, when it comes to short-term effectiveness, then, for example, paid search is a very effective medium. Online video is very good. But those short-term effects are only 40% of the payback. Add in the long-term effects, what do we see? According to Meta, the most effective medium today is television, followed by online video, followed by social media. And what we see, of course, is that TV and online video are merging. These audio-visual media tend to produce the biggest effects in the long run because they tend to have the most emotional power. And what you want to do is to create emotion at scale, and that means having broad reach audio-visual media and using the full palette of media available to you to reach the broadest audience. Typically, that means combining old and new media, combining legacy media with new digital media to get the broadest reach and the biggest impact. So choice of media is really important, and media planning is really important. This is from some research done using market mix modeling. Optimizing your budget in terms of allocating it across geographies, products, variance within the portfolio, and of course, choice of media. Getting all these things right can increase the efficiency and the ROI of your campaign by a factor of 12. But the other thing that is equally powerful is getting the creative right. In fact, getting the creative right is just as powerful as allocating the budget correctly. If you get the right creative, you can increase the payback by a factor of 10 to 12. Now, I'm not going to go into lots of detail about the elements of creative success. Those of you who were here earlier and saw Adam Sheridan from Ipsos talking about creativity will have seen some of that stuff. But there are some elements that I think it's important to talk about. We need to get attention. We need to do things that are interesting. This is why creativity matters, is you need to do things that are surprising, because you're talking to people who are not necessarily interested in your brand. But you need to do things that are relevant. Relevant to the category, relevant to the product, but also relevant at a human level. I was impressed by Adam's chart at the very end of his presentation where he talked about empathy. You have to remember that put the customer at the heart of your creativity and do things that appeal to them, that speak to them as people. What you do needs to be strongly branded. It's got to be very clear who you are and what you're selling. You need to walk a very delicate tightrope between consistency and freshness, between doing things that are new and interesting and keep people interested, while at the same time being true to who you are as a brand and to being consistent with things you've done before. And there's some great new research from System 1, which you may have seen, looking at the value of consistency and the way in which creativity builds up over time. If you haven't seen it, check it out. You need to produce brand work which is memorable and activation which is responsive. You need that mix of emotions and messages. Emotions at the top level, messages at the bottom. You need creativity, but you also need craft, which is something we don't talk about enough, which is production values, doing the common thing uncommonly well, taking a simple idea and doing it beautifully, casting, lighting, music, and so on. We don't pay enough attention to that. But what about purpose? Surely that's the missing ingredient. We know that purpose, surely, is the core of everything we want to do in advertising today. We don't just want to sell product, we want to make the world a better place. Well, I'm not against purpose marketing, but it's difficult because if you want to do purpose marketing, if you want to do stuff which is ethical or green or whatever, if you want to make the world a better place, you've got to do it in a way which is relevant to the purchase decision. And you've got to do it in a way which has mass appeal. I'm not just plucking these ideas out of the air. This comes from an analysis that my colleague Peter Field did using effectiveness data. You need relevance, you need mass appeal, you need to be credible. It's not enough to just purpose wash your brand. You've got to walk the walk. You've got to have purpose embedded in your company and your brand and your values and your behavior. And you've got to do it in a way that's distinctive, not the same as everyone else. And you've got to obey all the normal rules about creativity and advertising and marketing. And that is very, very hard. You've got to do everything you do to create great marketing and advertising, and you've got to do these other 5 things as well. So guess what? It hinders effectiveness. Purpose marketing is on average about 30% less effective than ordinary advertising. So if you want to be a purpose-driven company and a purpose-driven brand, fine. But know you'll probably make less money. Purpose comes at a price. And some people think that that price might not be worth paying, including possibly Procter & Gamble. And if they're saying that, maybe we should be asking some questions. The last area I want to talk about is measurement and evaluation. This might seem very dry, but it is very important. I think in the high tide of the digital-first wave, there was a thought that digital metrics would solve all the problems. That if you just counted the clicks, then you knew what worked. But the sad fact is that we're now understanding that direct, linear, digital attribution, counting the clicks, looking at the click-through rates, does not give a true measure of the incremental sales being generated, does not give you a true measure of ROI. Even Google and Facebook are now admitting this. Google and Facebook are moving away from linear attribution, moving away from counting the clicks, and they're moving towards market mix modeling, or econometrics, as I would prefer to call it. Because we now realize that those old digital ROIs were basically fraudulent. They were wrong. They were misleading. So Meta are using MMM, Google are using MMM, LinkedIn are using MMM. And that gives you a much better reading of the true incrementality, and particularly it's the only way to measure those longer-term indirect effects. And then the third leg of the triangle is controlled experiments. I showed you that one earlier on with the FMCG brand, dividing the country up into different regions. Controlled experiments, test and control, allow you to measure effectiveness in a very dramatic and direct way that allows you to cross-check those other two prongs, other two methods of evaluation. And it's vital, of course, if you want to test new initiatives, things you've never done before, do it through experimentation. There's a wonderful example back in 2018 where Adidas started experimenting with some of their digital activity in Latin America. You may know this story, where they started turning off some of their digital activities and found that some of them were actually doing nothing at all. The other thing I would add to this is a new technique that I've been working with and helped to pioneer, which is what I call share of search, which is not counting what people click on, but looking at what people search for, looking at Google search queries. And this is a very interesting new technique because it's a window into understanding what people are thinking about and looking for. And as I said earlier on, if you build a really strong brand, you get people searching for you, and you see that in the search data. And we're very excited about that as, if you like, an early warning system for whether your brand is strengthening or weakening. Now, I say, if you get this triangulation right, you can measure ROI and measure ROI properly, but handle that ROI data with care, because simply optimizing ROI tends to lead people in the direction of short-termism, whereas if you go long-term, if you build brands, if you use long-term strategies to build a brand consistently over time, that's where you get maximum profit. So profit first, ROI second. Focus on what generates the maximum net profit for your company and your brand. Don't just get seduced by short-term ROI. So, to sum up, we had, if you like, the digital revolution. Now I think we have a new effectiveness revolution, which builds on, but slightly overturns some of the things that we thought of in the first digital age. So the old thinking was, use digital metrics as your only North Star for guiding effectiveness. But that gave biased readings. Those clicks were not giving the right answers. So triangulate. Use digital combined with MMM and experiments to get a true reading of effectiveness. Don't be obsessed with short-term ROI, because that leads to underinvestment and short-termism. Think in terms of profit and shareholder value, and think like an investor to build your brand and your company for the future. Don't just focus on short-term performance marketing, because that can reduce your growth and reduce your margins. Invest in brands, lead with brand advertising, and support with performance, because that increases the efficiency of everything you do and increases your margins. Don't over-target. Targeting is secondary. Over-targeting leads to small audiences, small responses, small profits, and saturation. Think in terms of Byron's approach of sophisticated mass marketing. Reach first, targeting second. Digital first neglects valuable audiences, older people, many of whom have more money than the Gen Zs that you're targeting with TikTok. So if you're smart, you'll be combining old and new media to reach everybody for maximum reach and maximum effectiveness. Don't just do rational hard sell advertising, because that pisses people off. It annoys people. Rediscover the value of famous emotional creativity, because that is the key to maximum profit. And I hope that at the Effie Awards this evening, we'll see some of that kind of work being rewarded and being given the big prizes, because that's what the future is. So as we see people now understanding the new rules of effectiveness, we are seeing effectiveness rising, we're seeing efficiency rising, we're seeing sales and profit rising. That's the new effectiveness revolution. And I'd like you to join the revolution and push it forward here in Mexico City. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias a Les Binet por esta gran charla.
Thank you very much. Oh, I think we have a question.
Ah, ok.
Hello?
Una pregunta por ahí. Muchísimas gracias, sorry.
Hello.
Hello. Being the first type of wide-reaching media, what role does out-of-home play in the new effectiveness revolution?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yes. Being the first type of wide-reaching media, what role does out-of-home play in the new effectiveness revolution?
Out of home. Okay, that's a good question, actually. So, out of home is an interesting medium. It's one of the harder media to measure because there's not such good data on exposure. But that's a very good example of a medium where controlled experiments can be very powerful. Because out of home can be regionalized, can be very geo-targeted. And when you do that, we've seen some lovely examples where, for example, you look at stores which have got out of home near them and stores which don't have out of home near them. It can produce very powerful effects. Out of home is in fact the medium which has the broadest reach of any medium today. Bigger than TV, bigger than the internet. Everyone sees out of home. And increasingly now with digital outdoor, we have the power to add AV, emotional power to that. So yeah, plenty of life in that medium today.
Thank you.